Hello, English 1 classes. This post is to help you study for your second grammar quiz. On this grammar quiz, you will be asked to both define and identify the subject and the predicate of a sentence, and also the parts of speech noun, pronoun, verb, and adjective. We're going to start by defining and identifying the subject and the predicate of the sentence. The predicate is the verb in the sentence, and a simple way to remember that is the action in the sentence. The subject is the word that operates or does the verb. So, on the first part of your grammar quiz, it's going to say, what is the definition of the predicate? Your answer will be, it is the verb in the sentence. Your second question will be, what is the subject of the sentence? The answer to that is it's the word that operates or does the verb. We're going to use Mr. Robinson as an example throughout our lesson today. If we're looking at our first sentence here, Mr. Robinson tutors students after school. The first thing we're going to look for is the predicate, or what is going on in the sentence. What is the action? Sometimes it's a state of being. For right now, we're going to concentrate on the action. Right now, the action is tutors. Okay, so if we know that the verb is tutors, or in other words, the predicate is tutors, the question becomes, who is doing the tutoring? Okay, we now know that Mr. Robinson is the subject of our sentence. If we look at our second sentence, Mr. Vellucci has more hair than Mr. Robinson. In this case, the verb is actually going to be the word has. We'll go over more about verbs later. But anyway, as you can see in this sentence, Mr. Vellucci is in the front of the sentence and Mr. Robinson's in later in the sentence. The question could easily be, which one is going to be the subject? Well, the way you determine the subject is which one of these people is operating or doing the verb. Who has in this sentence? In this case, it would be Mr. Vellucci, making Mr. Vellucci the subject of the sentence. Also the more handsome of the two. The fish swam upstream. The verb in this sentence would be swam. So we can identify swam as the predicate. And once we've identified the predicate, we can identify the subject by asking who swam. In this case, it was the fish. So to review very quickly, subject and predicate. The predicate is the verb in the sentence or the action, and the subject is the word that operates or does the verb. This is part 1 of your quiz. Part 2 of your quiz, you'll be asked to define parts of speech and then identify them. So we're going to begin with our definitions. A verb is any word that denotes an action or state of being. For example, in the sentence, the dog barked, bark is the verb and it is an action verb. It's something that the dog, is doing or did. In our second example, he is cool. Is an example of a state of being. It is the verb, although it's not an action. It's called a state of being because it's simply what he is at that moment. A verb can be more than one word. For example, I am going to the movies. Am going is going to be your verb phrase. When a verb is more than one word, it's called a verb phrase. The word not is never a verb, and it's very important to remember that. Although many times it appears in the middle of a verb phrase. So for example, I am not going to the movies. If the sentence on your quiz said, I am not going to the movies, and you were asked to identify the verb phrase, you would identify am going as the verb phrase. It is also important to note that if there is a contraction, like he isn't going to the movies, the verb phrase would actually be is going. You would have to separate isn't into two words. We already discussed the subject of the sentence in our previous slide, and now we're going to talk about what part of speech the subject would be. The subject is always a noun or a pronoun. To review, a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. A pronoun is any word that replaces a noun. So for example, we're going to go back to using Mr. Robinson. Mr. Robinson is bald. In that case, the subject is a noun. Mr. Robinson is a specific person. We would say that, as a noun, that is a person. In our second sentence, he has no hair. The word he replaced the noun Mr. Robinson. Because the noun has been replaced, we would call that a pronoun. By definition, nouns and pronouns are interchangeable. The last term that you'll need to be able to identify is an adjective. Adjectives are any word that modify a noun or pronoun. Adjectives modify nouns and pronouns in four distinct ways, which you must memorize. Adjectives will modify nouns by telling whose, which, what kind, or how many. So, for example, if we look at the sentence, Mark's 3 little red marbles are rolling away. In the past, we'd probably look at this sentence and automatically think that Mark was a noun. However, in this sentence, he's an adjective. The subject of the sentence are the marbles. Okay, so when we look at red, what does that tell us about the word marbles, or how does it modify marbles? Well, it's telling us what kind of marbles. Red marbles. When we talk about little, again, we can either be talking about what kind or maybe which marbles, the little marbles. 3 tells us how many marbles, also modifying the word marbles. And in this case, Mark is telling us whose marbles. So rather than Mark being a noun in this sentence, he's actually going to be an adjective. There are 7 words that will always be labeled as adjectives, and these will also be on your quiz. Memorizing these words will make labeling and identifying parts of speech much, much easier. It's very important that you remember these. I remember them like a phone number. So every phone number begins with 3 digits and ends with 4 digits. You can do the same thing with this 7-word pattern. A and the, my hour, you're there. These words will always be adjectives, and we'll revisit that in a minute. Now, when we are trying to identify or label the parts of speech in the sentence, we have a list of steps that we're going to use. Step 1 is to identify the predicate, which we already know is a verb. We also went over the definition of a verb, where it's going to be an action or a state of being. So if we look at our first sample sentence, Aaron Rodgers plays football. The predicate in this sentence is going to be plays. That's our verb. Step 2 is to identify the subject. The subject operates or does the verb. In order to find the subject, you can ask yourself who or what does the verb. The answer is always the subject. If this was a math formula, it would look something like this. Who or what plus the predicate equals the subject. We already know that the predicate in this sentence was plays. If we ask ourselves who plays, the answer is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is going to be your subject. Once you identify the subject, now all you have to do is determine whether that was a noun or a pronoun. The subject will always be either a noun or a pronoun. In this case, because Aaron Rodgers is a specific person, he is a noun instead of a pronoun. The final step for your quiz is once you've identified and labeled the subject and the predicate, so you have the verb phrase and the noun or pronoun that operates the verb, you're going to go through and identify and label all the adjectives in the sentence. You can begin by labeling all constant adjectives. Can you remember the 7 words that are always adjectives? Go through the sentences and label those as adjectives. It is useful to label the constants because if you know that they modify nouns or pronouns, many times they will lead you to other nouns or pronouns in the sentence. For example, the shiny new car is Rob's. Our verb is. First thing, step 1, locate the predicate. We can label is as our verb. The next thing is to identify the subject, or in other words, who operates the verb or what operates the verb. What is? The car is. The question you ask yourself now is car a noun or a pronoun? I'm going to call car a noun because I believe it's a noun. Our third step is to go through and label all the constants. The word the is always an adjective. Because we can label it as an adjective, and we know that adjectives only modify nouns or pronouns, we can figure out what word is it modifying. Is it talking about the shiny, the new, or the car? It's actually talking about the car, which we already have labeled as a noun, so we know that that fits. We can now look at the word shiny. What is it doing in the sentence? The shiny car. we know that it's also modifying the word car. Any word that modifies a noun or a pronoun is an adjective. We can label that as an adjective. We're going to repeat the same process with the word new. What is the word new telling us in this sentence? Well, it's telling us that the car is new. Or in other words, it's modifying the noun. If it's modifying a noun, you guessed it, it's an adjective. The last word we have to look at now is robs. Ordinarily, we would think rob is a proper noun and we would label it as such. However, because we know that the subject of the sentence is the car, we have to look at what this word does in relationship to the subject. What does it tell us about in this sentence? Or what does it tell us about the subject of this sentence? Well, it's telling us whose car it is, which is one of the four ways that adjectives modify nouns. On your quiz, you will be asked to define verb and verb phrase. You will be asked to identify nouns and pronouns. You'll be asked to identify adjectives and tell me the four ways that they modify words. You will also be asked what 7 words are always adjectives. You will then be given a series of sentences and asked to identify the parts of speech in that sentence. If you are uncomfortable doing any of these things, please visit www.dailygrammar.com and click on the Archives tab where you have access to all the grammar lessons, or you can schedule an appointment to see me before school, after school, or during unit lunch. Thank you and good luck.